This guy was in cardiac arrest for 38 minutes with just us. Um, Now he has a pulse. There's probably not going to be a good outcome.
Welcome to When You Look, where ordinary people share their extraordinary experiences, and you get to decide, was it coincidence or God? Gentlemen, welcome to When You Look. Super excited to have each of you guys here for this incredibly unique story related to Cory. Thanks again for being on, everybody.
Glad to be here.
Pleasure.
Thanks for having us.
Here.
Awesome. Well, for those that are listening, and certainly for those that can see, we've got a whole host of folks on this particular episode. And the reason for that is that all of these folks were involved in the story that centers upon Cory. So we're going to get to that story here in just a second, but we'll start first with intros and specifically with Cory. So Cory, tell us a little bit about yourself.
All right. Thanks, Mick. My name is Cory Eubanks. I'm married to Paula, and we live in Georgia. And I'm the person that this episode is about, and I'm excited to be here, and I can't wait to hear the stories that everybody has to tell. And some of it may be new to me. Some of it I've probably heard. But anyway, I'm really excited to be here today.
Yeah, awesome. Well, super grateful to have you on the show here. John with an H, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm John, John Cory. I was the first person on the scene. You could say that. I mean, as the scene developed, I was there. Raced bicycles for over 30 years. Not really active now, but still enjoy riding.
Eric, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Eric Garcia from Marietta, Georgia. Been cycling, for 8 years. This was the fourth year into it. So I was one of the later arrivals, and I actually called the 911 for Cory.
Awesome. Right on. Okay. John without an H, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. So I'm John S. I'm an avid cyclist. I was lucky enough to be a part of this event. Glad we were there. Sorry we were there, but glad we were there to, lend a hand. And yeah, it's really great to see everybody again and, reconnect the dots. And because I tell you, 4 years is a long time and it's hard to remember all the details.
All right. Thanks, John. Glad to have you here. Matt, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hey there. My name is Matt Lassiter. I'm currently living in Northern Virginia near DC. I'm an avid cyclist. I've been cycling for about 5 or 6 years. The Helen Gran Fondo event was my first cycling event. And since then, I've been hooked, been doing bike races and trying to stay in shape to compete with the fast group rides in Northern Virginia. And it's great to be back here and see Cory.
All right, Dan, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hey, Mick, thanks. Dan Funk. I'm out in Colorado. I've been riding bikes for decades and been riding bikes for decades with a lot of the guys on this call today. And will forever be connected to everybody on this call today based on the story we're going to tell. So happy to be here and excited to be a part of it.
Evan, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So hi, my name is Evan. Like we said before, I'm excited to see some familiar faces and meet some people that, like John said, 4 years is a long time. So memory is a little fuzzy, but the Gran Fondo and Helen was my first. And unlike Matt, I was not bit by the bug. That was a challenge for me. And I have not ridden bicycles much since, but I had a great time and excited for today.
Awesome. Well, thanks for being here, man. Andy and Shad, tell us a little bit about you guys.
So I'm Andy. I'm not an avid bicycle rider at all. I was one of the first responders. I was the paramedic that was working on the Helen ambulance on the day of the incident. That's about it.
Yeah. My name's Shad. I was actually on the fire truck that responded with Andy to Cory's call. But yeah, super excited to be here to kind of see how this unfolds.
Gens, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so my name is Gens. At the time of the race, I think I was about, late 30s, we'll call it at that. And So I've been cycling at that point. I'd been cycling, I would say, for about 2 years. Something that during COVID, my brother dragged me into, just to spend some time together. Little did I know just how much pain and suffering I would go with him in those bike races. But relatively new cyclist, I would say I'm not an avid cyclist. I'll probably do it once a month or so. But yeah, just really enjoy everything that comes around the events.
Thanks, everybody. This is a unique one because not only do we have so many folks that were involved in this incident, but me, the host here, Mick, I was actually involved in this as well. So I was on this trip, which was a cycling trip that included Evan and Matt and Dan in from Colorado, and then John and one other guy up from Florida, for all of us to meet to ride the Helen Gran Fondo, which was slated for April 18th, 2021. So we're going to jump into April 18th, 2021. For everybody, as a reminder, we're approximately a year into COVID. And that meant for these larger outdoor events that they were just coming back, because almost all of them had been canceled for the remainder of 2020. And as they came back, they were coming back in a slightly different format. So the example that was applicable to all of us was that instead of a mass start that a Gran Fondo like this would be, meaning hundreds of riders all grouped together in a starting area, and then the starting bell or the starting gun goes off at a particular time of day. In this case, all of the riders were being paced out by waves. And so the Meteo, which was what me and the group many of the group that was on here, which was the middle distance that we were doing, which was 60 plus miles, that did not start any earlier than 9 a.m. And our group was slated for a 9:15 wave. We ended up leaving around that time, and Dan will end up sharing a bit more of those details. But that timing really does play a lot into this. So before we get into the actual start of the event, Cory, let's turn it over to you. Give us a little bit of backstory of what kind of put you at that Helen Gran Fondo, and how this was a bit of a different type of scenario than one you were usually in.
All right. So I'll kind of give you a little bit of family background first. So we have 3 kids, and now they're 33, 31, and 27. So back in 2017, we were getting our youngest one off to college, and me and Paula, my wife, we were like, well, what do we do now? Are we going to stay in this big house we're in on the golf course, or are we going to sell it? What are we going to do? So we did some research, did some looking around and talking about it, and we decided we wanted to buy a motorhome. So we bought a motorhome, a 40-foot motorhome, and we bought a car to tow behind it. And we sold our house in Peachtree City, which is south of Atlanta, and we sold everything that we owned. So we got rid of everything, basically. And we hit the road traveling after we got him off to college. So we had been on the road traveling all over the country for roughly 4 years. And we were coming back to the Atlanta area because our middle son, who had gotten married while we were on the road, was having his first child. So we were back in the Atlanta area for the birth of our second grandchild. And we also had to have some work done on the motorhome over in Alabama. So we dropped it off in Alabama, drove back to Atlanta, and stayed at my mother-in-law's house for several weeks. So in the process of that, we thought, well, we just need to take a break. So we went up to the Helen area because my sister-in-law had a house in a place called Sky Lake. It's a nice subdivision just outside of Helen. It's a very nice place. So they had a house there. So we decided we would just go out there and stay for like a week or two and just kind of take it easy and just kind of relax, even though I was still working at the time. So we did that. And on the first week and of course I took my road bike and my gravel bike up there because I travel with that everywhere. I ride all over the place. So I did that. So the Friday of that week, I was just looking online. I saw this thing called the Helen Gran Fondo. I wasn't sure exactly what that was, but I looked at it and I was like, that looks interesting. I'm right here next to it. So why not just register for it? So, I registered for it on Friday when the race was, I think that year was on Sunday morning, I believe. So it was really kind of a last minute thing from my perspective. So I thought, yeah, that'll be fun. I can, do that. I've been riding a lot. I'm in pretty good shape. I might do well. I don't know. So anyway, I signed up for it. And so Saturday, I always take the day off before like a race like that. So I took Saturday off, but we went and hiked up Mount Yonah, which is right outside of Helen as well. And if you've ever been to Mount Yonah, it's kind of a strenuous hike. And, I had no problem doing that at all. I had no issues. I had no symptoms. Nothing was going on in my physical body. So, we went home that night, went to sleep. I woke up the next morning fairly early. I remember, from what I remember, I fixed breakfast for myself. I drove over to Helen by myself with my bike. I remember checking into the registration tent. And I remember when I checked in, they were like, "We don't have any more t-shirts." And I was like, "Oh, really? You can't give me a t-shirt? I wanted to get a t-shirt." So I didn't get a t-shirt. But anyway, I remember checking in. And from that point on, everything for the next week was just a blur to me. I had no idea that any of that had happened to me, unless, of course, my wife told me that happened, and I found out from other people that happened, that this incident happened. So um, that's kind of a little bit of background on how we ended up there and how I registered for the race and, how I showed up for the race and whatnot. So
Yeah.
I'll certainly give some more details later on, but that's just kind of my backstory at this point.
Yeah, that's great. And that's super helpful. So, John with an H, why don't you tell us what you were up to that morning, kind of leading up to the start of the Gran Fondo? And for all of the folks that are listening to this, a Gran Fondo is a really interesting type of ride, and it's originally birthed in Europe. And it's a scenario where it is a race, which is why Cory is referencing a race, but it is also a ride. And so there's a race within a ride, essentially. So a complete race is not what it is, but there are timed segments inside of it. And the cumulative time for those multiple time segments is the actual race. And so that's what Cory is describing when he's talking about a race. And then there were folks like me who were not planning to race and be competitive in that race, but instead ultimately being there to have the enjoyment of the overall ride with some of those time segments. But John with an H, talk us through what was going on for you that morning and what leads into you being there riding.
Okay. Well, first of all, I wasn't supposed to be there. I had originally thought I would do a motorcycle track day at Road Atlanta. I was late in registering. All of the run groups were full. However, my wife, Christy, was planning to do this Gran Fondo to ride with a good friend of ours, Erica, for her first ride back after having a child. And so, maybe the night before, the day before, I said, okay, well, I guess I'll go. If I can't go do what I wanted to do at Road Atlanta, I'll go. And registration was closed. And so I said, you know what, I'll bandit the ride. I don't need the support. I'll just ride up the road. And then when the group comes by, I'll just get in with the group. So yeah, so that was that morning. We drive from Brevard, it's where we live, down to Helen, get out, do the normal thing before a bike event, make sure the bikes are good. And then I say to my friends, all right, I'm going to ride up the road, because I know they're going off in waves. What I didn't realize was that I had ridden up. I was slightly familiar with the area, having ridden around there a couple times, but I didn't realize that that's where that I was going up to the time segment. So I thought I'd ride, a mile and a half up the road, kind of do a little housekeeping before, however long of a ride that was going to be. And then I knew that the next group would be this group, and so I would just sort of absorb into that as they went by.
So, Eric, let's go to you. Tell us what was going on with you that morning.
So a group of us went up. It was 4 of us all together. 2 of my friends were riding the 100-mile version, and Gens, he and I were doing the shorter version, which we always do. And I remember it was freezing. I'm like, I don't even know if I want to do this. Maybe I just want to stay in the car, have some hot chocolate. I'm like, let's go. So I remember just freezing, shivering. I said, we got to do it. Let's do it. Put on our arm warmers. I don't know, layers of everything. We got pumped up and we just started pedaling. And I remember it was just a beautiful, clear, crisp morning, and we were really pumped up to start doing it. We launched off, everyone, the endorphins started going. We were really, really excited. Razzing on each other the whole way up, and that was really the start of the morning. But it was close to saying, let's just stay in the car and we'll go when it warms up. But we did muscle through. I'm glad we did.
So that morning, I remember we got up really extremely early because we live in the Marietta area, so it's just north of Atlanta. So for us to get to Helen, I want to say it's about an hour and a half drive. So Eric and I were just sitting in the car trying to stay warm and just, goofing around and trying to get warmed up and just get ready for the race. I hadn't trained much for this race, so I just knew I had to bring everything I had to make it through it. So yeah, it was pretty relatively relaxing morning. I'd just come back from a 10-day vacation, so I was in a good place.
All right. Well, Dan, give us a sense, give the listeners a sense, because in this case, I really was there, but describe for kind of the whole crew of us what was going on that morning and what led us to be where we were when we were.
Yeah, it's funny, Eric, that you said it was a cold day coming from Colorado. It was definitely bright and crisp, and I felt like it was unseasonably warm compared to what I was used to leading into that ride. So, but yeah, we were there for a cycling trip. Mick, like you said, there's a group of us that have done this for a long time. We had some new folks that had joined the ride with Matt and Evan and Chad, who's not on the call today, but just a great opportunity for a great group of guys to come together and have some memory making experiences. So we had ridden 2 days prior to the trip. I think we all flew in or drove in, the previous week, Thursday-ish. We rode on Friday, we rode on Saturday, and the Helen Gran Fondo was kind of like the queen stage, so to speak, for our event. So instead of driving down, we stayed in Helen. We hopped on our bikes and we had a very fast descent down the hill into town. And just I think like John with an H said, like you have this energy around the beginning of the race. There's lots of people there. There's tons going on. It's the first time we've raced during COVID, so that was always like a little what's this going to be like. But yeah, we all kind of threw a leg over the bike and jumped on, went our wave and started heading up the road. And I just remember getting into that first time section, and thinking like, all right, here we go. Like game on. It's time to start to ride. And then everything kind of changed pretty drastically at that point.
Yeah. Thanks. I'm just going to add to that. So I recall specifically that we were the 9:15 wave. So as I was talking about this earlier, the Medio, which was that middle distance, couldn't start any earlier than 9 a.m. So our entire group had registered for a 9:15 wave. And as Dan was just talking about, we were way up above the town of Helen. And I mean, it was like a rocket ship straight down the road, like 20% grades down. So it took us a split second to get down to the start line. And realistically, it took us maybe 5 minutes. But we left the house at 9 and got down to the start area where we would need to pick up timing chips. And of course, everybody other than John with an H, who was banditing the ride, would have been doing the same type of thing, right? Getting their timing chip, because again, there's some time sections in this. So we're anticipating due to COVID and all of the wave starts, that there will be a lot of people, but that there will be things like social distancing and that there will be a lot of time required in order to get those timing chips. So we left at 9. We're down there at 9:05 for a 9:15 wave start. And it took us all of about 30 seconds to get our timing chip because there was nobody there. All the other people had left in the 9 o'clock wave or the wave before us or whatever it was. But we're thinking this is going to take a while, and it doesn't take long at all. Literally, we are then sitting in the staging area, this whole group of us and a handful of other people that we didn't know or recognize. And we're looking at each other going, are we going to sit here and, to Eric's point, kind of freeze for another 7 or 8 minutes until it's 9:15, or should we just go? Because there wasn't any type of marshaling that was preventing us from going. So we all just decided, let's just roll. We got everything we need. And again, I think that's really important, that timing. So we're supposed to go off at 9:15, and realistically, we're probably rolling around 9:08. So we then start rolling. And at this point, kind of everybody is basically rolling. I think, Eric, you're on the road at this point. John with an H, we know that you're on the road. And so other than Andy and Shad, we're all kind of on the road up to and including Cory. So Andy and Shad, let's just go to you guys real quick. What were you guys up to that morning in the fire station?
So we usually start our day in Cleveland at our main headquarters station. We check off our trucks and stuff like that, and then we go to our outlying stations. Usually they like us to be in our zone. So in the Helen zone, we get there around 9:00. We get all of our food that we're going to eat for the shift, and then we just kind of start hanging out. And Shad was working with the fire department that day, and we were talking about the race and just kind of doing our normal routine for a Sunday morning.
Yeah, one thing I remember specifically was when we were kind of coming into work up there, is as we're going into Helen, over there on the back street where the race started, we see all the tents and all, like, the start and the finish line, all that. And our first thought is, oh crap, what's going to happen today? Because we anticipate, or we're told ahead of time when the race is or certain things are going on. And so we knew it was happening, but when we go and we see all the people and all the cars, our first thought is, what's going to happen,
Yeah. Going to be a busy day at work, essentially, right?
Well, never know. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Hopefully not, but you never know. Okay. So I think we're at the point in the story where now everybody is essentially on the road except for Andy and Shad, but they're there. They're at the station. And I want to kind of describe a little bit about what happened with a particular vehicle that was on the road when our group was on the road. So who wants to take that from our crew?
Yeah. So I recall, as Mick alluded to, us being kind of by ourselves in a smaller ride group and just starting to begin. And I remember coming up on what I believe was the time section, because it was the first time we felt like we saw like an official. And I don't remember if he was on a motorcycle or what have you, but it seemed legit. And as we were approaching that section, I recall vividly a jacked up red pickup truck, a Chevy pickup truck, kind of fly by our group. And we were, we're a small group, but it was a number that takes up the lane, as people who ride bikes know, that it's you want to appear and be visible on the road. And I remember being passed what felt like aggressively, and my initial reaction was to get pissed. I was frustrated already. I was cold and didn't want to really be there that day, but I was having fun. And that was an aggressive pass and turn. And so I remember rounding that turn to then what appears like a truck parked in the middle of the road diagonally, and a body laying on the ground with a group already around it. So it was an interesting thought of, well, what just happened? And I remember being like, I can't believe, someone just hit a rider. And then we find out that's not the case. Yeah. So that was an interesting start to the race.
Yeah, I really appreciate how you described that. It definitely seemed like it was a very, very aggressive passing of us. And if I recall, it seemed as if it was super unsafe because it was also around a corner, a blind corner, essentially. So this particular driver was giving us every bit of the signs of he or she didn't want us on the road. And yet they play a really interesting role here in just a second. So John H., bring us up to speed, pardon the pun there, on how things were going for you on the road at this point.
So I think that the group that my friends were in, I think they left at 9:05. So I rolled off just before 9. Nice, easy warm up and get situated and everything. And I position myself where I can see the group coming from a distance, and I see a group coming from the distance. They're going slowly at that point, and I just roll out into the lane or near the white line, figuring I'll just let them roll by. And then, but as they get closer, this is where the time segment starts, which I didn't realize. But once I saw it, I was like, oh, that's what's going on. And so the bunch turns into a pointy line. And, being somebody that's not officially on the ride, I don't want to interrupt anybody who's, has certain goals for that ride. So I let the group comes up to me. I'm probably rolling at like 12 miles an hour. I'm not sure how fast they're going, but I let probably 8 riders go by, and I notice that's when it kind of fans out a little bit. So, and there's a little gap. So behind the 8th rider. So I just slide in, right behind that 8th rider, which, as I've learned, is Cory. And, so it's not very long. It's probably less than a minute. I'm watching the wheel in front of me, and I see that this person's sort of backing off and easing up, and I'm like, oh boy, this is a guy that saw me come in, and he doesn't want people doing this. And I've been here before. I'm kind of getting ready to just sprint around him and play that game. But as I'm sitting there and he's going more slowly, and normally somebody that is going to do what I'm anticipating them to do, their body language will be a little bit more animated. Cory's was not. And it was a gradual slowing down, so much so that the group, kind of the rest of the bunch, goes by, and I can tell something's wrong. So this is not some guy that just wants to make sure I'm not screwing up with his time segment. And something's wrong, and so I roll up next to him and I look, and he's just looking straight ahead and almost, and barely kind of pedaling and stiff, kind of like held in a position. And I'm talking to him, and I'm asking him if he's all right. And I say, let's pull over. Something's wrong. Let's pull over and recover. And, I don't know what's happening with this person. Did he take like some sort of bad supplement or like drink too much coffee or something? I have no idea, because the effort has started, the heart rate goes up. And so we kind of pull over and we sit down on the side of the road, kind of just off of the white line, but still right at the edge of the pavement, and with our feet down, kind of down the hill of the ditch. And I'm talking to Cory, trying to kind of figure out what has led him to this point. How he's feeling. And actually, it's interesting, Cory doesn't remember any of this, but he was responding to me, and he was responsive, and he was talking to me, and he said he felt lightheaded. And I said, well, we're going to sit here until you feel better, and I'm not going to leave. We're going to, even if we have to just ride back, we're going to, I'm going to stay here with you. So don't worry about that. And, I'm sure I was yammering about something else. And then he just leans back, head on the pavement. Fortunately, he's wearing his helmet. And I'll admit, I looked and I was like, what is going on? This is not it. The situation turned from, oh, this is somebody that's not feeling well, and and he's going to feel better. Like his heart rate's going to come down, whatever's going on, his heart rate's going to come down and we'll ride. I know I miss riding with my friends, but we'll see what happens. It goes from something that's minor to being like, oh my gosh, this guy has a real problem. And so I guess we can think about this. If the group I integrated in left 2 or 3 minutes before your group gets passed by an aggressive red truck. We've been sitting on the side of the road. Cory passes out or loses consciousness. I look, I see that truck coming. I get up, go out in the middle of the road, hail him down. I'm literally in the middle of the road because he wanted to go around me, but he stopped. I wasn't going to let him not stop. And, I'll admit, I didn't know what to say. I was like, we're part of an event. There's probably an ambulance in town. I don't think there's any cell coverage here. Can you contact somebody at that event? Can you do you have a phone? Can you do this? And I think while I'm saying that, which is kind of interesting, so Evan's probably like, oh my God, there's a guy arguing with a guy in a truck and a guy on the ground. He's probably giving him the riot act. But I see this group coming and, fortunately, I mean, with, full respect to the driver who was aggressive to the bunch behind, he, I think, tried to help. I don't know what he ultimately did, but he tried. Which is, refreshing, but seeing that group was like, okay, here's some other people that can help. And the relief when they came up and some of them said they had some medical training was like, oh my gosh, incredible. All the while, Cory is laying there. I mean, it was probably a minute, after he passed out, I get up, flag the guy down. I see the group coming, and I'll admit that part of it is a little fuzzy to me. Like, what happened? I forget what I said. I guess we were all in bike costumes. So when I see you on the call now, I don't exactly recognize you. But about what happened in that point, because I did not know what to do. I've taken CPR and that kind of emergencies, but in that moment, I didn't know what to do.
All I'll ever remember is just seeing John and Cory and pretty much exactly how John just described it. Just Cory being, I don't know if using the word sketchy is the right term to use it, but just very unusually wobbly all over the place. Immediately knew something is not right. And being the type of person that I am, I'm like, Eric, let's hang out. Let's hang out behind these guys for a little bit. Let's just see what's going on. That's kind of what I remember. And then obviously things went south or whatever you want to call it right after that. But just as they pulled over and they sat down exactly like they described it on the side of the road, I remember Cory just kind of like his head kind of being hunched down and him holding the bike and kind of almost looking frustrated at the bike, drops the bike and then just bam, falls backwards on his head. And as we pull up, we stop, that happens. Yeah. And then just immediately know something's not right.
And then what did you do?
So we get off the bike and I immediately go and get like above him, and then he's still kind of breathing a little bit. It's slowing down. And then just having known and seen enough stuff, I just knew it wasn't a good sign. And I do remember him almost snoring a little bit before it all stopped. And the color in his face, a little bit that was red from, climbing his blood flow, just immediately that color disappeared almost instantly when he was pale. And immediately I knew, I was like, we've got to get moving on this guy. And I think that's when I kind of snapped at it. Eric, called 911 now. And I know John was in the immediate vicinity right there. And him, I think we found out that he didn't know him. And I remember getting down and trying to take his helmet off, and he he had one of those helmets I guess I'd never had that kind of just, it comes off, maybe it's a little bit of a weird slide, and I didn't know how to do it. So I remember John helping me take that off. And honestly, we just started doing chest compressions immediately. And one of the things that I remember is why we kept going and I kept fighting for him and even trying to hunt him down is the reaction his body gave to me the moment we started doing chest compressions, almost as if his color was slightly coming back. It was a good sign. It gave me the hope of, hey, we need to keep going.
So Eric, I think we should probably shift to you.
So I believe I was there right before you all had been there. So Gens and I pulled up front, right? Because we saw Cory at the time sitting upwards, and we said, something's not right. Let's pull over. Say, hey, and I believe the two of them were talking, and I was by my bike, and I remember just seeing him sit there. I said, I think he looks all right. He looks like he's responsive. Then suddenly when I saw him like lurch back like that, suddenly slammed his head into the ground. I was like, uh-oh. I said, get over there. We got to do something right away. And I believe that's when the car came out and the whole 9 yards. And then I remember Gens went over there right away. There was a couple people there at the time, right? I remember he had pulled his sunglasses off right away and put the arm down Cory's mouth so not to swallow his tongue as they were trying to keep him, because he was convulsing a little bit. And then I think you guys all started to roll up, because I remember they said, oh, he's unresponsive. Is someone a doctor? And all of this was going on at the same time. And then I remember looking at my phone. I said, we got to call 911. There was no service. So I remember just in the middle of the road stopping cars, because it was pretty busy, right? All these cars stopped. Then finally I got to a spot and said T-Mobile Connect, and I got through 911, and I was like on the other side up in the hill a little bit. Anyway, I got 911. I don't know who it was, and they're like, where are you? And I said, Helen, Germantown. I don't know where to tell you. We're in a race, probably 2 miles up the road. The person needs help. Send some. I was like yelling at them because they were trying to explain where you were. I said, I don't know where I am. Find me. We're in Helen. We're on a Gran Fondo Road. Send someone right away. I was probably said a couple of colorful words. I said, you got to get someone here. And I don't know who it was, but that's when I was on the phone with them for a while, because I guess they were tracking my location. And then I could hear sirens in the distance, which I believe was the fire truck or the ambulance at the time. And then we all came to Cory. And then at that point, everyone was doing chest compressions, holding his airway clear. I remember doing that at one time, holding the airway open. And then everyone was doing rotations of that. And it just, after that, it was all a blur. It seemed like everyone was just switching positions, doing the compressions, keeping them going. And we were checking for a pulse, and we're like, someone said, there's no pulse. Got to keep doing it. And everyone just kept on pushing. And it was scary. At that point, he was gone. But I said, and someone said, I believe it was someone with a medical background, you got to keep his blood flowing. And we all just kept doing it. And then the EMTs showed up, and I remember putting him on the stretcher with the machine. And what stands out to me vividly was he's got no pulse. And at that point, I'm just like freaked out. I felt like blood rush in my head. We just saw someone die, but it was just it was just a blur, and we were all just coming. I know at that point you guys were all there, and it was pretty wild at that point. But something else was taking over because we were all just doing it.
Let's rewind a tiny bit. It sounds like you had run up a hill in order to get cell service.
Yes, because once I saw him went back. We went up to him, checked them out, and I looked at my phone. I said, "We've got to get 911 right away." And there was no cell phone service, because I remembered it was off of a graded road where he was. Everyone was, and then across the road it was a little slightly elevated. I remember running across the road as I was stopping traffic, and there was a little embankment. I kind of walked up it a little bit in cycling shoes, trying to. I remember sliding, and suddenly I had service. Like the bars just shot up, and I just called 911, and it connected. And I just stood still because I couldn't want to move. Yeah, it was just, but there was no service anywhere. But there was this little notch. Somehow we had service, which was wild.
Yeah, Dan, let's cut to you here because I am recalling you and I essentially like sort of almost shouting at each other, like speaking very loudly with each other about you were like, I'll try and make a 911 call. And I think I said something like, I can't get any service or I don't have any service. So I said I was going to go back. Do you recall any of the specifics there for what was going on for you?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, just like Evan had said, like we just come around a corner, we see this scene unfolding in front of us, and it's not chaotic yet, but it just has this feeling of chaos, right? There's like a lot going on, and the truck is there. And once we realize, like, all right, the guy didn't hit Cory, thank God. But something else is seriously wrong. Same as everybody said, like looking at our phones, no service at all. And I can't remember if I talked to him or if somebody else talked to the driver in the truck, but I remember him being one person amongst many who actually had service. And it's like, he's like a local guy with probably a local cell phone plan. And miraculously, he's the guy, right? The guy that everyone is so angry with, right? Not 5 minutes prior. He is the guy that has the bars to connect. And Eric, I didn't know that you had called too, but like, I just remember thinking like, thank God this guy is here. And despite what we feel right now or have felt more recently about him, that he is here to help us in this situation because he played a very pivotal role. So I'm sure there was multiple people who made that call or attempted to make that call and get help on the way. But yeah, it was like an immediate change in feeling. I remember feeling towards this man that had kind of buzzed us in his truck. And then from there, it's like the scene unfolded. You know, John and Matt, who we're going to hear from, just jumped into action. And I just remember staying clear of that entire scene, right, and letting those guys do what they needed to do. And we're in the middle of this timed section, so everybody that's at this race is like ready to go. I mean, they're like, they have no idea. They come around this corner, they see this scene, and I would say, probably more than 50% of people either stop or at least made an attempt to ask, like, hey, is everything okay? Do you guys need help? And it was like, I remember thinking, like, the last thing we need is more people here. Like, we have enough people to do what we needed to do. And I just remember telling people, like, this guy's not responsive. Please pray for him as you head up the road. And that was it. And it was like, that felt like so inconsequential, frankly, at the time, because I'm seeing guys do chest compressions and giving Cory CPR, administering just nonstop, right, with no reprieve. I remember just standing there thinking, like, I'm just going to tell people, hey, I think we have this under control, but please pray for this man who's clearly in a place that we don't want him to be.
Yeah. Well, John without an H and Matt, we're going to go to you in a quick second here. And Evan, we're certainly going to hear from you also. But I want to give you guys a quick sense for where I had gone just as part of this whole thing, because it also relates to what Dan was just talking about. And because I couldn't get a cell call out to 911, I thought, well, we had just passed a course marshal right at the beginning of the time section. That was minutes before. I'm like, I'll race back there as fast as I can, because in my prior experience from other races and rides and fondos like this, most of those course marshals would have a radio of some sort. So my hope was I could get back to that person quickly, because nobody in our crew. So while Eric, your call may have very well been actually happening, since we didn't know each other, right? We weren't communicating. So I have no idea, and I don't have coverage. And I'm thinking to myself, well, I've got Verizon. Verizon tends to work the best. If Verizon isn't working, it's not working. Nobody's got anything. I'll go back to the course marshal, or at least that was the intention. So I raced back there as quickly as I could. And I get there and I say to the course marshal, I'm like, somebody just got hit by a guy in a giant red pickup truck. Okay. Because that's all the information that I had at that point, which is we sort of all have begun to explain is actually not correct. But I was saying to the course marshal, you got to send some help. Do you have any radio? And he goes, no, I don't have a radio. And I remember thinking to myself, how do you not have a radio at an event like this? And he's like, but I got a motorbike. So I'm like, get on it. So he literally takes his like 4-stroke. I mean, it was literally like a motocross kind of motorbike. It wasn't even like an enduro type of thing from what I remember. And he's like, all right, I'll go back. And I was like, yeah, go back. So we're going to go to Evan to kind of talk about his experience here in just a second, just sort of broadly. And then I really want to get into the meat of things with John and Matt. But that guy leaves. And so I turn around, and before I get all the way back, I am passed by fire truck and ambulance. So Evan, tell us what was going on for you at this point before we hear from John and Matt.
Yeah, my experience was similar to Dan's, I'd say. I wasn't very hands-on. I just remember rolling to the scene, and adrenaline's, you get the adrenaline dump, your heart rate goes, and you kind of just like locked in. And I remember being really, really proud of my buddy Matt for just jumping straight in, like no hesitation, immediately stabilizing the neck. I have a picture of it because I remember being like, all right, well, I'm going to snap a picture of this truck, which I did. And then in the background, you see sort of what's unfolding, and Matt's there stabilizing the neck right there on the white line on the edge. And seeing that, again, like Dan said, a lot of bodies don't need more people in there. It seemed like they had a good rotation going. I excused myself. Cory was super blue, and I'd been around death before, but I'd never seen what I perceived as a dead body. I mean, that was overwhelming. So after that adrenaline dump kind of wore off, I was super emotional, and I'm not normally that way. I'm a big guy, and I carry myself that, largely, I guess. But I went to the, embankment and just sat there and felt very overwhelmed. And I'm not a praying man usually. But I felt compelled to like ask for something, whatever's out there. Like we need help here. And I remember that and crying and saying words, and another patron coming over and sitting with me. And we just talked through it and said, it's going to be all right. We just prayed together, and I found, comfort in that. It was a cool experience for me, being out of my comfort zone in that space, knowing that's going on over there and I can't help. So I'm going to just stay out of the way. But, it's interesting to hear other perspectives on the event.
Yeah.
Sure.
Well, thanks for filling us in. Okay. So Matt and John without an H, talk us through how things went down.
Matt, why don't you go?
Okay. So, like everyone else, Evan was saying, and we came around the corner and we first saw the truck and Cory on the ground. So I had medical experience. I was an EMT, and I work in the operating room. So, doing CPR and being around patients that are sick, unhealthy, dying is, sort of more normal for me than everyone else, unfortunately. And so, rolling onto the scene, we see Cory on the ground, a truck, and we don't know what happened. And my first thought is, okay, he could have a neck injury. And because we don't know if he fell off his bike, got hit. And so I run over there and hold the C-spine, because that's what I know what to do. And we check. I'm checking the carotid pulse, and I instruct someone else who I don't remember who it was to check his groin to see if he had a femoral pulse, which he had no pulse. And I think it was John who was right there. I told John, like, we have to CPR. And John jumped in immediately and just started doing CPR. And from then it was basically tunnel vision. I don't really remember who was there or what was going on, but it was, I was basically just doing what I had learned how to do. And, I was holding his neck and trying to open his airway as much as I could.
And directing, it sounds like John to start with compressions. So John, tell us what that was like.
Yeah. Well, I mean, honestly, I don't know if Matt wasn't there, if we'd be here collectively. I mean, we needed somebody to direct traffic. And, I mean, I think most of us are action oriented, but in that moment, you're just so like stunned in the moment that you're not really sure what to do. So you're looking for that, that commanding voice. And Matt was like, this is what we need to do and blah, blah, blah. And like, okay. So, I want to backtrack. I don't want to go too far down this, but two things about the red truck. One, I think we would all agree we leapt to the wrong conclusion about red truck guy because we all had a perception of that. Then I do remember seeing the interaction between John and the truck guy. And I was like, oh, it's on for sure. Not knowing that, Cory was in the state that he was in. But I remember he had a CB radio and I thought that was how the connection got made. I was like, he could be the only person left in America with a CB. And I think that's how he made the connection. And Eric, of course, too. But I'm just saying, anyway, red truck guy went from being a zero to somewhat of a hero quickly.
I'm going to butt in. It looked like the group, when they saw the red truck guy, with their body language was like they were ready to fight.
Oh, yeah.
It was weird to see him. I was like, well, no, this guy's actually stopped. Sorry.
Well, Evan was ready.
But yeah, I just want to underscore that, like the move from bad guy to maybe not so bad guy.
Right.
100%. Yeah. So, Matt, I think directing traffic and, and Cory and I were actually talking the other day about this. What's hard to appreciate is how physically demanding administering CPR really is. So, Eric took a rotation. I'm sure a lot of people on this call, Matt probably a lot of people took rotations because you just physically have about 2 to 3 minutes in you. And then, you're maxed on your own effort and heart rate because of how hard it is. And then the other thing I want to go back real quick to Evan's comment, I think there was a lot of people in that, especially as the moment got longer, as we got deeper into the situation and people were stopping, like there was a lot of people that were very emotionally traumatized would be the word I would use. I mean, people could see trouble. And I think I saw people head back. They're like, we're not doing this race. We're done. Like, we're emotionally not going to make this. And I know we eventually had to make a conscious decision on whether we wanted to continue, but there were a lot of people that were really thrown, I think, in that moment, that weren't a part of the whole experience. Tunnel vision that Matt used was a great experience. You just kind of focus in on what you're doing in the moment and you do it.
Well, for you guys who did compressions, let me just say that you did them the right way because you broke my ribs. And from what I understand, if you're doing chest compressions the right way, then that's what happens. Because you got to put that kind of pressure on the person to get their heart going or whatnot. So
That's right.
you definitely did the right thing. And I'm not mad about that at all. I'm very thankful you did that. So thank you, Matt and John and everybody else that did that, Eric. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here, I'm sure. So thank you for that.
All right. And then before we go to Annie and Shad, let's actually confirm this. Again, this is for Cory and for others, right? Who was actually doing chest compressions?
I know I did.
We all were.
Okay.
I think
Until the machine came to do it.
And then Gens as well.
I don't remember doing any chest compressions actually, because I was just so focused on holding Cory's neck stable. So I think everyone, John, Eric, and other John, y'all were just doing great doing chest compressions, and y'all,
Yeah.
did an awesome job.
And Eric was just talking as well that Gens was also, it sounds like. So
He
it
was, yeah, and he also had
four of you guys.
his eyeglasses down Cory's mouth to keep his tongue down.
So I remember doing chest compressions, and so honestly, I was the first one to make actual physical contact with Cory for probably the first couple minutes.
And I remember Matt telling everyone what to do now, because Matt had his head. I remember that now. And we said, "Is the airway open? Airway's open." He was watching everyone the whole time, and everyone was just going one after one. It was a rotation. I think there was more than that was on this call, because it was a long time, and it's yeah, it was constant, and it was like everyone says, tunnel vision, right? Everyone just finished, next person popped in. There was no one skipped a beat. We were just going and going and going. I mean, people were exhausted just doing it, and something kept us doing it because he had no pulse.
All right, Andy and Shad, we're going to go to you guys. Give us a sense for how things went when you guys get the call, whether that came from, as John was saying, the CB radio for the last person in America, or through the 911 call that Eric got out. Take us from there.
All right. So we got the call through our 911 system. And when it was paged out, it was paged out as a cardiac arrest. And I don't want to sound like I don't care, but when it's paged out as a cardiac arrest, our senses kind of heighten a little more than they would for a granny falling. I don't know if that sounds bad or what, but that kind of, put us a little pep in the step. We got the call at 9:27 and we got on scene at 9:35. So 7, what is that?
8 minutes?
Well, almost 8 minutes. Yeah. Of y'all from the 911 call. Now, I don't know how long prior to a call getting out that y'all were doing CPR. And then we had the Lucas on 2 minutes after we got on scene. So back up a little bit. We were in front of the engine, and when we kind of get on a scene like that, where we're going to kind of take over a road, shut it down. We don't want cars coming back and forth. We pulled up just past everybody, and I look and I see Cory laying on the ground, and the partner that I had that day, I looked at him, I said, "This guy's dead." I was like, "We're working nothing." Like he looked like death. We get on scene and someone says, we've been doing CPR on them. I heard someone say that they were a doctor. I guess we were just trying to figure out like what transpired as far as, did he start complaining of chest pain? Was anybody around? Was he having difficulty breathing? Any kind of little bit of information that we can use to help, I guess, with our treatment going forward. So we put him on the what they call a Lucas device, which is a box basically, and it has a plunger, and it does continuous CPR for us without stopping. I have not had that my entire career. It is a lifesaver. Doing CPR for any amount of time is not fun, but yeah, we just kind of rolled up, and I don't know how far you want me to get into it, but when we rolled up, I didn't think we were going to be getting this person back at all.
Yeah, keep going.
So it's kind of funny when we got the call. Like we said, we were in the bay. We had just gotten to the station. It wasn't probably 10 or 15 minutes before. And if you know anything about our county, we're super busy all the time with limited resources. And so truthfully, the fact that there was an ambulance available when y'all called within 10 minutes is a miracle in itself, truthfully, because 9 times out of 10 you would call and we wouldn't even be available. You would have gotten an ambulance 30 minutes down the road. And that happens a lot.
Quite a bit. Yeah.
So we happened to be in the bay just talking. I think we were probably talking about the race, what was going on for the day. And so when this call came out, like Andy said, it came out as a cardiac arrest, unresponsive. And so we jumped in and took off down the road. Took us a few minutes to get there. And I do remember, like Andy said, we shut the road down because there was traffic. There was a lot of people there from what I remember. And then, like Andy said, Cory was laying there and saying that he looked like death. He was as white as the lines painted in the road. He looked horrible. So I remember we were getting information. I do remember when we were finally able to put the Lucas on. At one point, I don't remember if Cory's helmet was still on or off by the time we got there. But I know when we started the Lucas, a lot of times, because there's a piece that goes up behind his back, and when we start it, somebody, and Cory's a little bit of a smaller guy compared to the size that we typically put on that machine. But his head would kind of start hitting the back, and I think um, Matt said a second ago that he was kind of in that head holding C-spine in his in the airway region, and I remember asking somebody, "Hey, hold his head, put your hands up under the back of his head," because it was hitting the ground every single time it did a compression. Um, so I was like, he is dead, but we don't want to make matters worse if we can help it, you know.
So once we get kind of the Lucas going and we get Cory on a stretcher and put him in the ambulance, we put our monitor on him, where our defib pads, where you see the people that say, clear, and you shock them. When we first put the defibrillator on him, he was flatlining. They call that a systole. He had no cardiac activity whatsoever. In that case, we went ahead and started IVs on him, and we started giving him some medication, epinephrine being one of them. We eventually were able, with the epinephrine and a couple of other drugs, were able to get a rhythm in his heart that we could give electricity to that would help. We gave him electricity, I think, 5 times, 5 different times throughout the whole call, it's a lot. That's a lot for anybody. We got, but go back just a little bit. When we got into the ambulance and we had him hooked up and everybody's kind of doing their thing, like we know each other pretty well, and we know what each other are thinking and what needs to be done next. So after we had got him in the ambulance and we had the monitor on him and stuff like that, I went ahead and put a breathing tube down his throat so we could breathe for him. Once we did that, and I don't know if I've ever shown Cory this, but we try not to get emotionally involved in calls. It's just kind of, it's not, you're not taught that. It's just kind of part of it. But I'm going to show this. This is my father. Cory looks just like my dad. And that's who I saw on that stretcher. And in that moment, I didn't want to give up. I mean, there was so many signs that were saying, hey, we're doing everything we can. And at some point, you just say enough's enough. I mean, the body can't handle it, or the body's not going to recover from this. But I don't know if it was, God inside of me, or if it was just the thought of seeing my father laying there. But we kept going. And we did a lot of things to Cory going to the hospital. We were about 38 minutes into the call from the time that we picked Cory up to the time we got to, we say it's a little past our halfway point to the hospital. We gave Cory one last shot. Cory got a pulse back with that shock. And his eyes fluttered. And in that moment, I knew that something happened that was more than what we could just do. There was life that was being brought back into him. And that was something that only God can do. That's how I feel.
I do want to chime in right here because, and I think it was maybe one of the Johns that I talk to. So that day I was a firefighter. I was on the fire truck. I'm a paramedic as well, but I wasn't working like on an ambulance. We're totally separate. So that specific day, I decided to let his partner just ride in the back with him, and I jumped in the front and drive. A lot of times when you have a super critical call or it's something that involves a lot going on, um, I would have jumped in the back with him because having two paramedics in the back, having two people's thinkers going, and so the reason I didn't jump in the back was because in my mind there was no cardiac activity. In my mind, he was too far gone. Like I was like, there's nothing I'm going to do back there. I'm going to let his EMT partner be in the back because it's just going to be a cookie cutter call. They're not going to do anything else. They're not going to get anything back. We're going to get to the hospital and they're going to call it. And that's what I vividly remember thinking in my mind. And so when I was getting out of the back of the ambulance to get in the driver's seat to leave, it was somebody that I cannot remember. And it may have been you. Yeah. You said, "Hey, what does it look like?" And I said, "It doesn't look good. We're just going to go ahead and go, but he's probably not going to make it." I remember those words coming out of my mouth. And thinking back now to know that he was in what we call asystole, it's a flatline PEA. There's no cardiac activity. These statistics, and I've got some on my phone here, I'll share in a second. The statistics for someone to come back, regain a pulse, and even walk out of the hospital after an episode like that is almost zero. So it's not anything I did, what Andy did. I think our skills and y'all's bystander CPR played a lot into it, but it was more than us. And it was definitely more than y'all too. So, I mean, you can call it a miracle. You can believe in what you believe in, but at the end of the day, it was a God thing. It was a miracle. So
Lots there, guys. Thanks a bunch for sharing. So I want to hear from the rest of the group in a second about what was going on for you guys during this period of time. I remember observing that there were a number of conversations happening, but let's just go to the guys that were doing chest compressions. Describe for us what was going on or what you were experiencing when Andy and Shad and the team of medical professionals showed up and essentially tagged in and allowed you guys to no longer be primary on Cory. What was that like?
Yeah, I'll go first. I remember, I think it was the conversation between the other John and Chad, and we gave my contact information. It might have been to Andy, because we wanted to know, right? I mean, we wanted to at least get closure and whatever that looked like, and we thought we would get updates on the course post event. And ironically, one of the problems we were having was, what do we do with Cory's bike? Like, that was a real problem. Do you remember that, Chad or Andy? Like, we couldn't figure out what to do with his bike. I don't know that you could get it, like, you couldn't get it on the fire engine or the fire truck.
yeah, I do remember. So when we decided to take off to the hospital, my partner that day, I think there was a conversation maybe with you and him or somebody, because at that point we didn't know Cory's name. We didn't know his birthday. We had no information. So what we ended up having him do is he took off back to the start line to try to find somebody in charge with like an emergency contact. And he wasn't able to make it. But he ended up finding somebody. And I remember driving to the hospital. I'm talking to him on the phone and I'm relaying information to Andy, given Cory's name, his date of birth, his wife, Paula, who he finally got a hold of, all of her information. And he was able to call her, and in the most reassuring way, explain a little bit about what's going on, but not giving too much detail. Because I think she was at Cory was at her sister or your sister's house up in Sky Lake at the time. And I think he had to call her several times because service up there is pretty scarce. And he was able to talk to her and say, hey, there's been an incident, but you need to get down to this hospital in Gainesville, like right now. And that was the only way we even knew who he was or what kind of information we had on him, was the information that he gave prior to that race.
Yeah, and I think Casey and them took his bike back to the fire department actually, and they came. I don't know if your son or if it was Paula that came and got the bike later on, but they ended up taking it to the fire station.
Matt or Eric or John, you guys want to chime in at all in terms of after Andy got there and team and the medical pros started taking over?
Definitely. It was I think it was like all of us, once Andy and Chad were there, I think we were able to like sort of breathe and take a deep breath and step back. I think because we were so sucked into what was going on with Cory, and our adrenaline was really going. So I think when they arrived, sort of like, okay, we can take a step back and breathe. And they, the EMS is in control now. The professionals are here. I don't have much experience with, cardiac arrests and cardiac events. And I was optimistic because we started CPR so early that Cory would, I didn't realize the gravity of what had happened. But I was optimistic,
Yeah, that transition, it was like gradual. It wasn't, it's not like a complete switch out because there was constant service to Cory, and it was kind of gradual. But I remember saying, "Hey, let's stop his Garmin because I bet there's some useful heart rate information on there." As it turns out, he wasn't wearing his heart rate strap, so at the end, it didn't have anything. But yeah, I would echo Matt and in that it was a bit of a relief, but also sitting there going like, oh my gosh, this is 20 minutes ago or 25 minutes ago I thought this is somebody who drank too much coffee, or something, it was something that would pass, and here he is on the ground, and it doesn't look good.
Having not really been involved in those situations that closely before, there was an immediate sense of maybe agitation, or maybe just being annoyed of me expecting, having watched movies and how they jump in there and it's like chaos and it's all, everyone's like sense of urgency. And it was the complete opposite. Just very nonchalantly walk into him. And I remember being like, someone is dying here. Why are they not rushing? And obviously they know what they're doing. Obviously it worked out. But my initial reaction was like, well, I expected a little bit more of like urgency, and I expected them to have, the, whatever you call those, to jump his heart. But obviously all of that happened once they put him in the ambulance. But that was my initial just reaction of it being not what I expected. But, I had to rely and trust their training and knowing what they're doing.
Eric, what do you want to add?
I know, it's just almost surreal listening to all the stories, right? From all the different vantage points. It was, the transition, reliving it now. It happened so slow motion, right? The EMTs came up. And it's almost like you were hesitant to like giving the reins away, right? Because we had all been doing everything for so long. And then I remember the EMTs took over, and it's like, well, what do we do now? And you're sitting there like, you didn't know what to do, right? I think everyone was so lost in a way. You're standing there like just lost, dumbfounded. And then when they loaded him into the ambulance, and it wasn't, we were like, does he have a pulse? Does he have a pulse? I remember asking one of the EMTs that, and said, no pulse. And I just remember taking a moment of silence. I said, it was weird, right? I just remembered getting back on the bike after the ambulance pulled away and just pedaling. And should we go? Should we come back? Should we go home? This is weird. I don't know. And I don't know. I remember some of the crew that was there, we were all just slowly pedaling. And I remember we asked at one of the rest areas, I said, did anyone say anything that what happened to the gentleman? And they said, I heard he had a pulse. They got a pulse. So at that point, I remember, I don't know who was there, but it was like a shot of something. And then we started pedaling. And then at the end, we said, well, how is he? Well, we heard he's in the hospital. He's alive. He's doing well. And then I remember one of my friends saying, you should see if you can get your time modified for that segment. I said, it's funny, but it's not funny. But
Yeah.
it was just surreal, and reliving it now. It's like, wow. Everyone was so in sync. Hearing all the different stories and how they kind of just molded together is just incredible. But it's a miracle. It's nothing other than that. Because he wasn't alive.
Yeah, I mean, I think we know all of that very, very plainly medically from lots of people saying that. So, Dan and Evan, what do you guys want to add here? And feel free if there's anything. I know you guys kind of describe what was happening for you at this point, but now that you've heard a little bit more, if there's anything else that you guys want to chime in with, feel free.
The only thing I'd say is I think it's really interesting that Andy pointed out first thing, which is, we feel this moment for us was like endless, like a long time. And the moment from call to arrival on scene was less than 10 minutes. That's crazy to me. I really didn't. You could convince me that this whole thing happened for 20 to 30 minutes. But it's not the case. And it's an interesting fact.
Yeah, good point. We'll come back to some of that in a second. Dan, anything you want to add?
And just like hearing all the other additional perspectives, especially from Andy and Chad, and what you guys did and the commitment that you made, the decisions that you made. And it's so moving. Cause I remember thinking like, we just saw a man die on the side of the road. I mean, I actually remember texting my wife when we got to the top of that climb after we decided to continue going. I remember we got to the top of the climb, had enough service. I remember texting my wife and just saying like, I don't know if this text is going to go through. I'll talk to you later, but, we just saw a guy die on the side of the road. And I'll tell you about it later. And, yeah, I mean, just, clearly that's not the outcome that happened. And, Eric, I was laughing at your comment about the timing. I've never been so happy to come in almost dead last in a Gran Fondo, because of the amount of time that elapsed there. And I'm thankful for every second that we stood there and, tried to do what we did.
So I remember watching the machine do chest compressions on Cory. So I had, as mentioned, gone back to the course marshal and I had been beaten back to the scene by the ambulance. So I never saw Eric and John and Gents doing chest compressions. I get back to the scene when I see the medical professionals handling everything. And so it was clear at that point to me that there was no role for me to play at all in any type of physical sense. And I also recall that I think it was Dan, but it may have been other people. Even I think it actually might have been John without an H that was directing traffic because, as Andy had mentioned, the road was basically shut down, but there was half a lane available and then enough of a shoulder to kind of get people through. And so we were just trying to be good citizens and help people, get around. And so there was ultimately nothing for me to do in any kind of tangible physical sense. And as I was on my way to the course marshal and on my way back, I was praying. And when I got back to the scene, I got off of my bike and I remember being approximately 15 feet behind the ambulance. And I got on my knees in the middle of the road and I was praying. And I was praying for who is Cory, but we have no idea what his name is. And I was praying specifically for God's glory to be revealed. And I was asking him to bring this man back to life. Now, I have no idea who this person is. And like nearly all of us in this conversation, it was fully my perception that that person was dead. So Cory at the time, as we later found out, is in his mid-50s. He looked to me to be well into his 70s. And I remember remarking to myself about how old the guy was, and I was surprised to see him riding. Well, ultimately, I think that was just evidence of the fact that there was literally no life in him. And so he looked so massively aged compared to what he normally looks like. So similar to what Dan was describing earlier about sort of seeing, knowing, many of us, hearing there's no pulse, checking for no pulse like Matt did. It was very clear to me, having never seen a dead person, that Cory was dead. No question about it in my mind. And I remember thinking to myself that they just loaded a dead man into that ambulance. And I could see the machine going and all of that, and the lifelessness, just sort of how Cory's arm just draped around as they moved him and the gurney and all of that type of stuff. Well, this whole time I'm praying, and I was praying out loud, which wasn't exactly a normal thing for me to do, but I was praying that God would literally bring him back to life. And when they loaded the dead body into the ambulance, at that point, it was like it was over. The whole thing was over. And admittedly, I was disappointed because I had been earnestly praying for a miracle, that God's glory would be revealed and that he would come back to life. Because it sure looked like everything was being done properly in order for that to occur. And I'm like, God's got an opportunity to do this. And so I transparently was disappointed. And I got up at that point because everything has clearly been done. And I remember standing next to Chad, who was part of our group, and just sort of looking at him. And he was many inches taller than I was, so it was sort of odd to actually be looking up at him. But I sort of looked up at him as I'm standing up, and he says, "Thanks for doing that." I'm thinking, that's weird. Like, what, And he goes, "Well, while you were praying, I texted people at my church, and they stopped the service and all started praying for him. So thanks for doing that." To which I said to Chad, I was like, "Well, thanks for doing that." Like, that was a big deal. At least to me, it was. So the ambulance drives away. We talk about this a little bit more previously, that, I think it was John without an H, who was sort of the lead negotiator on getting the guy running the fire truck to take the bike back, because a lot of people were looking to us to take the bike because, our crew had been so involved in this. And we're like, we have no idea who this person is. And we're like, we're on a ride too. You have big truck and there's little bike. Take little bike and put little bike in big truck. You know what I mean? Don't make us have to do something with this, And then eventually the firemen ended up taking it back, and we were quite relieved because that gave us the opportunity then to have the decision as to whether or not we were going to continue the ride. And so I'll chat for our group. I remember all of us talking about that and being emotionally wiped. But we were kind of discussing the realities of we did everything we could. And the reason we came here was for this particular ride. So maybe we should just decide to finish the ride out. John, Eric, you guys continued. What was it like for you guys, or how did you get to that decision point?
Well, the ambulance took him. Said, "You want to turn around, or what should we do?" I said, "No." I said, "I don't know. Again, so let's just pedal. I just want to pedal." And I just pedaled. I don't remember racing. I just pedaled. And I remember taking the left up the hill, right? And it got sunny again. And I just remembered pedaling and not talking until the top of the mountain. And then we caught up again. I said, "God, do you think he's all right?" I just remember that vividly. And then the first rest area, we found out that he regained his pulse somehow. Somebody found out. So, but I just remember just pedaling, but not even thinking about it, just just to clear my head, I guess. Like we all do, right? Pedal to clear your head. It was just part of that. But it was weird. I remember that part of it really just vividly, climbing in the sun. But with no real emotion, just kind of like shocked, but just pedaling.
Yeah, I can relate to that. And I distinctly remember, like, you're describing that left-hand turn where the climb really
it was a left
started.
and then up. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't remember the hill. I just remembered going.
Saw the ambulance about to take off. I think that's when Eric and I decided, hey, we got to get moving if we want to do this. Yeah. And then it was a very emotional, probably, because it was a good 10, 15, I'm going to say 10 miles before the next rest stop. And I remember that because I blew out my legs. I mean, we just went way too hard. Up the adrenaline and just emotional. And I mean, I definitely cried on the way up. So.
Yeah, I remember. So, you're there, you're in the place. There's this place that you've been for about 30 minutes. There's all this meaningful activity happening. The subject or the object of that activity gets put in a red truck, doors close, it moves, everybody dissipates, and you're still standing there and you're like, what just happened? Like, did that really just happen? And I think, like Eric, I kind of, I didn't want to ride with anybody. I just wanted to process that, like, what just happened? And it was really a roller coaster of emotions, like for the next, I don't know, 50 miles or whatever. Because I didn't know that he made it. I didn't know that he was alive. Like I got to since I remember, nobody knows I'm there. Like nobody in the organization knows I'm there. So I get back to the finish and I'm like, well, I should kind of tell the guy that putting this event on that I think somebody died. Like I'm sure he knows this, but that I think somebody died and I was there, and I'm guessing he's going to need some sort of statement for insurance or for what you do when somebody dies at your event. And he's the one that said, "Oh, I don't think he's dead yet." So, yeah, but it was yeah, I needed this space to just kind of process what happened.
Well, Annie and Shad, let's go back to the ambulance ride. 38 minutes in from time of call, and now there's a pulse. Take us from there.
So once we got the pulse back, we put on what we call a 12-lead EKG, which basically takes 10 different view picture of your heart. When we did that, I could see in that Cory was having a heart attack. I called the hospital, which is Northeast Georgia Medical Center in Gainesville, and give them a heads up. Hey, this guy was in cardiac arrest. We've got him back. We've done an EKG and he's showing what they call a STEMI, which is a ST elevated MI, which is a myocardial infarction. Sorry, I can't talk. And what they do at that point, it was alert the cath lab, which is where they'll go in and put stents in, open up the blocked artery that was causing the incident to occur. We were probably 12 minutes away when I called, and when we got to the hospital, that team was there and they were ready to roll. So we went with Cory upstairs to the cath lab. We watched for a couple of minutes to just confirm our suspicions of the heart attack and kind of could see where it was in the heart, and then compare it with the information that we were getting through the EKGs. I think when we left there too, me and Chad were just kind of talking, about the call, and I think we were both just kind of like, this guy was in cardiac arrest for 38 minutes with just us. Now he has a pulse. there's probably not going to be a good outcome. Or if there is an outcome, it's not going to be one of good quality of life. Um, we've seen it, multiple times in our field where there's not such a good outcome. But the next shift that we were back on duty, we were down at Gainesville, and the guy that I was working, my partner, to checked to see if Cory was still alive, and to our contacts or whatever, they told us, yeah, he's still alive. He's in the ICU. Me and my partner went upstairs to see Cory, and that's when we walked in, and he's sitting up in the bed, and he's like, my chest hurts, and I don't remember any of y'all's, but I want to say it was your mom, that Cory's mom, that was there at the hospital, and she came and she gave me a hug, and she said, "Thank you for saving my son." And Paula was there, and I mean, just the overwhelming part of that and being involved. And then now you're emotionally involved in it, and you want to see the progression of how he continues to do is, it it's something that we need to in our profession. We need that closure. We need to know that what we did, be a very small part, that God was in control of everything. I mean, and that's bottom line. And Chad will agree with it with me on that one.
It's crazy to think. He's been doing this a lot longer, not showing your age, but we've ran, I don't know, 100 cardiac arrests probably. Same scenario, same situation. And you can count on one hand how many outcomes we have like this. And it's amazing what bystander CPR does for one. Because that truthfully was probably one of the biggest reasons why Cory's still here, is because it took us around just under 10 minutes to get there. Within 10 minutes of not having CPR, someone's going to be brain dead. Within 3 to 4 minutes without anything going on is when the damage begins to occur. So had the bystander CPR not been going on, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now. And that's not a take away of any of the miraculous part of it, but God's going to use everybody. He's going to use all of our hands to take part in this, as we've been listening to for the past hour or so. And it's just a part of it. But the bystander CPR that is why Cory is here.
Yep, 100%.
Right on. Right on. Well, Cory, we're almost to you, but I want to hear from the group. Let's sort of like close out the day, essentially, because I remember for our crew, we got back to the finish line. Evan, you met us there because you took a little bit of a shorter route back. And I believe it was then that we had heard, but perhaps we had heard earlier. I don't recall. So maybe somebody can clarify that. When did our group find out that Cory might have still been alive, although still in quite a perilous situation? Anybody recall that?
I thought it was when Paula called us during dinner. That's kind of what I remember, because we couldn't really get any good information at the rest stops. I don't remember getting, like, we asked a couple people, and it's all volunteers, and information wasn't really flowing real well. And then we were like barely getting to the last one without them shutting down anyway, because we were so late. But we got a call from Paula during dinner, and she was the one that let us in on the news. And the way that she voiced it was that they were trying to keep him going long enough just to meet a new grandbaby. And that was the goal, like Chad and Andy got him there. And at this point, they're just like hoping for him to stay alive a little longer. They can, have the baby there or whatever. And Paula was obviously super upset and everything else. But at that point, we were like, okay. We all kind of sat there at dinner and we were just like, okay, wow, I guess, listen, not to upset anybody, but we literally were like, well, he's probably going to be heavily cognitively diminished, or damaged. You just can't go that long without, and we had not administered CPR, right? It was all compressions because the protocols changed so many times over the years, but we just thought that, this was kind of he's going to, be there for a few more days or however long they want to keep him on life support. And that's it. And that was until I heard from, it might've been Andy, a couple days later, when he told me the Chick-fil-A story. It was either Andy or maybe it was Chad. I don't know. One of them called me when I was back in Florida and was like, are you sitting down? And told me the Chick-fil-A story. And I'm like, what are you talking about? So anyway, that's kind of what I remember how it went down.
Yeah. Anybody else have any other recollections from the end of the ride that they want to share?
Yeah, from the end of it, we were always wondering. We talked to the race director, trying to find out who Cory, who he was, what happened. No one knew anything, right? So we looked at the score, time chart afterwards. Again, we're driving home, both of us, and he found Cory's name, did not finish, and then he looked onto Facebook, and I guess he found Cory's. I think it was Cory's son's Facebook, and he reached out to him, sent a message. I was just at the Gran Fondo, and I think I helped your father. And I think he reached out to two different people, and one of them was Cory's son. And then he responded, and then Paula reached out to Gens, and that's how we kind of heard all the news.
It's in my mind, I did not know that he had survived. So in my mind, he was a goner. So I felt like his family needed to know exactly what happened. And we were one of the last few with him. And, we took care of him. Just needing to tell him that's really what the drive was. And I very specifically remember getting a list of the start times with everyone on there and being like, oh, wow, they send this to everyone. Okay. And thinking in my mind, I bet I can identify who the person is. And, just once I was able to narrow it down, I'm like, well, this should be easy because most cyclists, what do cyclists love more than riding? Posting their rides. So I just knew the moment I would get a name, I would be able to hunt him down. And then running into realizing he didn't have much social media outside of the Strava account. But then somehow, I think it was when I was going through Strava account, I think I saw some pictures. I'll have to go back and look, but I believe maybe I was able to see his followers on Strava. Maybe one of his sons was his follower on Strava, of which then I sort of Googled his name and I found his Facebook account. And then lo and behold, he's on his son's pictures on profile. So I knew I was spot on that I'd found him. And luckily, I think Adam, his son, I believe his name was Adam. Luckily he got back to me relatively quickly, which honestly, I don't know that there's been many happier moments in my life than just realizing that he survived. Because I was like, hey, we were a part of that. So I'm so immensely proud of the story. I tell it to everyone. I'm so proud of it.
Then look, like last year we went riding together, gravel riding, and I couldn't keep up with Cory. So
yeah, it's a beautiful thing.
Stronger than ever.
We're going to go to you, Cory, here in a second, but I'll just kind of round this out. So I recall meeting Evan back at the finish line and going up to the race director and saying, hey, listen, similar to what John with an H was talking about, hey, we were involved in that incident. We'd like to stay in the loop. And so I remember giving that guy my phone number and asking him to keep us posted, having very low expectations for outcomes, but also that they would even follow up with us. And so we then went back to our house eventually and cleaned up and went out to dinner. And then John, without an H, you're right, that's how it went down, that Paula ended up calling me. I decided to answer the phone. It was an unrecognized number, or a number that I didn't recognize, but was somewhat local. And so I thought, oh, maybe this is related to everything that happened. So I answered while we were all at dinner, and it turned out to be Paula, who I had never spoken to before. She and I spoke briefly, and she began to thank me for everything that I'd done. And I was like, I haven't done anything. All I did was pray. You got to talk to the guys that actually did chest compressions. So I handed the phone over to John, and then I remember you stepping away just to a quieter area to be able to have a conversation with her. And then we kind of got a bunch of information after that. So Cory, you get delivered to the hospital, and tell us a little bit about not only what happens, but what parts of it you remember.
Well, that's the $1 million question, because unfortunately or fortunately, I don't know which one, I don't remember much of anything at all. From the time I checked in that Sunday morning for the Gran Fondo until basically that whole next week until Friday. So I don't remember anything about the incident at all. I don't remember anything. Now, there were two interesting things I remembered in the hospital, which may sound weird, and I don't know why I remember this, but I did. Um, you know, you have to go to the bathroom in one of those cups when you're sitting in the bed. And so I remember I was filling mine up so fast, I was having to call the nurses in there like all the time to come, you need to come in here and empty this thing out because I can't keep doing this. So that's one weird thing I remember. The other weird thing I remembered in the hospital was, so at the time, the previous few years, me and my wife had been doing intermittent fasting. So I wasn't eating breakfast. So I remember vividly when I was in the hospital, they came in and said, well, what do you want for breakfast? And I was like, I don't eat breakfast, but yeah, I'd love to have breakfast. So I ordered an omelet with all this stuff in it, which I was surprised they gave me, but they did. So those two things are two things I remembered in the hospital. And I remember the day I was discharged, which was that Friday. And Paula was there, obviously, and helped me get out. And we met with some of the doctors outside, took pictures, and so I remember being discharged. And another funny thing is that Friday when I was discharged, she had been coming back and forth to the hospital from Sky Lake, and she had passed this ice cream place, and she was like, on the way home, she said, "Let's stop and get some ice cream." So we stopped at the ice cream place and got ice cream on the way back. Which, again, I guess for a cardiac patient, especially that soon after that happening, I'm like, is this a good idea? I'm not sure. But anyway, I got like a milkshake, and it was the best thing I'd ever had. So,
well, the stints were fresh at that point. So
I know. Well, I think that the doctors have said, well, like you didn't have high cholesterol, you didn't have this, you didn't have that, your blood pressure was good. And the only thing I know for sure, 100%, is that this is purely genetic. So my two grandfathers, one grandfather died in his 40s, one grandfather died in his 50s. My dad had at least one heart attack. And I don't want to go off the rails here about this story, but I'm going to tell it anyway. 2 years ago, we were at my house here in Sonoya, and we were celebrating my grandson's 10th birthday. And so my parents came over for the birthday celebration. And my dad just wasn't feeling quite right. We could tell something was wrong. Well, throughout the night, he started feeling worse at our house. And eventually, we said, well, let's just go back on the back porch and just lay on the couch and just get some fresh air. Well, he did that. Well, the next thing we know, he had a defibrillator in his for his heart. That thing started going off like a lot. And he went into a flatline situation just like I did. And so I was on the phone with 911, and my daughter-in-law was doing chest compressions on him on my back porch. And so finally the ambulance showed up. They put him on the ground, and they put the same Lucas machine on him that Andy and those guys had put on me. Sorry.
It's okay.
So it was just really surreal. To be on the other side of that and see that happen to my dad. I couldn't believe that. I was just like in shock. And he ended up passing away that night, which we weren't overly surprised because he had some serious heart issues and problems. So, but it was crazy to go through that situation so similar to what I went through. Well, I mean, it was sort of similar, I guess, but kind of the same thing, and just be on the other side of that and see what was going on with him. And just like Andy, like you guys were talking, like when you put that machine on a person, it makes their head bang back and forth. And I was sitting there watching his head banging back and forth, just like my head had banged back and forth, even though I didn't know that it happened. So anyway, I just wanted to throw that story out and just let you know that, a similar thing happened to me, and I was on the other side of it and got to see it firsthand. And it was scary and frightening. So I can only imagine what you guys went through seeing me on the ground that day, going through all that, and then everything you did to help save my life. So, yeah.
Well, Cory, thank you for sharing.
I didn't mean to get all emotional about it,
man,
but
that's welcome here.
I've talked to several of you guys over the past few years about this, and I think I cry every time.
Yeah, the emotions are totally fine here. Take your time, man.
It's just hard because I don't remember anything about it. And sometimes I'm like, did this actually happen to me? Which I know it did, without a doubt. But it's just so weird to think about it because I don't recall anything about it. I don't know how it happened, what happened, the whole process of that week in the hospital. I don't remember for the most part. So, it's just, I know it's hard for you guys to think about it, but on my side of it, it's just like, I shouldn't even be here. Like, how did this even happen? Why am I still here? Because like Andy, like you guys said, I mean, maybe at best 1 out of 100 cardiac arrest patients will survive. And those are not good odds. And especially for me to be back functioning normally like I am. I mean, I left the hospital that week and I was just like, okay, well, what's next? What are we doing now? It's like nothing happened to me, even though that was not the case. So,
yeah.
The next week I actually started working again. We stayed up in Sky Lake for like another week and I started working again. And one of the weird things was, this is, I guess, related to my situation, but like I couldn't type quite right. I was mistyping words and I was having to backspace a lot and retype stuff and all this. So I'm sure that was the after effects of what happened to me. But yeah, I mean, after that, everything just came back normally and it was like nothing ever happened to me. So it's just so strange and bizarre to think about that.
Yeah. And Cory, based on that, you mentioned the backspacing and those types of things, mistyping.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say, roughly speaking, it was in terms of total amount of time until you were back to quote unquote normal?
I think mentally, it was probably no more than 2 weeks. Seriously, which I was shocked about that because before that happened, that Friday previous to that happening, I was working on a project. So I'm a professional hacker. So I hack into stuff and tell clients how to fix their problems, that kind of thing. So I was working on a project. I was in the hospital the next week. The next week I started working again, like on Monday, but I couldn't work fully a full day. I was like really tired. So I had to take naps during the day and that kind of thing. But by the end of that week, I think I was kind of almost back to myself again for the most part. And then it just continued to get better and better after that. So I would say 2 to 3 weeks after that incident occurring, I think I was pretty well back to maybe where I was before. So I didn't have any long lasting mental problems or anything, which is really shocking.
Yeah. Well, round us out a bit with some of the physical achievements that have occurred for you since then. So you go from quite the, how shall we say, dramatic do not finish or DNF of the Helen Gran Fondo in 2021. And then what happened in 22, 23, and 24?
Yeah. So just after that happened, we came back down to Tyrone, Georgia, which is where my mother-in-law lives. We were staying with her while we were waiting for the baby to be born and our motorhome to get worked on. So we came back there and I continued working. And Paula was like, okay, you are not going to ride your bike again until you go through your cardio rehab. So I was like, yes, I understand that. I totally get it. That's fair. I'll not do that. So I went to cardio rehab, and later in the summer, I went through all that, and that was all fine and good. I had no issues. Everything was good. Although I was the youngest guy in that cardio rehab class by far. it was kind of funny because all these other guys were in there were like, 70 plus years old. They were pretty old people. So I went to cardio rehab, and then we picked up our motorhome. We traveled to Bentonville, Arkansas, and we were traveling with some friends at the time. They had just bought a motorhome too. So we got there, and I went on my first mountain bike ride with a friend of mine who was also a cyclist there in Bentonville, which is a great place to do that, by the way. And I was just remember that first ride, I was just like sucking wind. I was so like, I'm never going to do this again. I can't do this. But to make a long story short, I continued to ride. I got back into shape. We continued to travel until 2022. And so that next year, I was like, we were up in Hiawassee, I believe, which is close to Helen, still in the motorhome. And I knew that the Gran Fondo was coming up again. So I was like, I'm going to sign up for this and do it again. So I signed up for it and went over there, and I met the guy running the whole thing. His name is Ruben. And he was like, what are you doing here? Like, he was like surprised to see me. He couldn't believe I was there. And so I did the race and came in first place in my age group that year. And then 2023, I went back again and I came in third place in my age group. And then last year I went back and got first place in my age group again. So, for whatever it's worth, I mean, I've been doing this for 38 years. So, I started out racing on the road and doing all that stuff. So I've been doing this forever, and it's kind of part of my, DNA at this point. And last year I actually rode over 15,000 miles. So, it's not like I'm a casual rider. I do quite a bit of this stuff, and I do Tuesday night rides with the Fast Race Group, and I ride Saturday mornings, and I just do all the stuff. So physically, I've gotten back to pretty much to where I was before, and I'm thankful for that because I still enjoy doing it after so long. So it's been a good thing for me.
Yeah. Really wonderful, those outcomes. I want to let the listeners know too, though, that a professional cyclist, and Cory, you are not a professional cyclist. You mentioned you're sort of a white hat hacker. A professional cyclist will typically ride somewhere between 15 and 17,000 miles in a year. So for you to be at the level that you were in terms of 15,000 miles in 2024, being post the myocardial infarction from a handful of years ago, is quite astounding. So really, really amazing.
Yeah, I think I've recovered well, and I've had, I guess to say the least, I've had no recurring issues. I go to cardiologist once a year. I go to the GP twice a year for physical and checkups and that kind of thing. And, in fact, I was going to the cardiologist twice a year. And then the last time I went, the guy was like, I don't need to see you for another year. So he just said, don't come back for another year. So I'm going back in May of this year. And one thing they do when I'm there, when they had me in the hospital in Gainesville, they put what's called a loop recorder. They put a loop recorder in my chest. It's not a defibrillator, but it's a loop recorder. So it records my heart. And every time I go to the cardiologist, they read the information off of it and tell me if I've had any, instance like tachycardia or bradycardia or, atrial fibrillation or anything like that. And, since that incident occurred, I've had no instance whatsoever show up. So that's good. And, my issue was really not an electrical issue. It was a plumbing issue. So it was just the arteries had gotten clogged up. And, another thing, which I don't think we said yet too, is one of those arteries was the LAD. So that's the widowmaker artery, which most people don't survive when that happens. So, the fact that I survived is, I think Andy or one of you guys said it before, it was a total God thing. And I believe that 100% to my heart. No pun intended.
It's funny. I literally didn't get it. And then we're like, oh, no pun intended. Like, that makes perfect sense. That was a good one. That was a good one. Well, guys, you've all been awesome. We've got a few more moments here where we want to land this plane. And we do that here on When You Look by asking everybody 2 questions. And the first of which is, was it coincidence or God? And we're very intellectually honest here that not everybody necessarily has the same answer, but we'll kind of go in a similar order to where we went with the introduction. So, Cory, we're going to start with you and just give us a quick response on, from your perspective, was this a coincidence that you survived? Was it a coincidence that everybody was there? Or was this whole thing, from your perspective, kind of a God in action type of moment? And then we'll roll through with everybody else. And again, I can't overstate this, that it's really important to me as the host here that everybody gives their honest opinion on this and that we all have different opinions, and that's A-okay. So, Cory, was it coincidence or God?
That's a very easy answer for me. I think a lot of people could say that this was coincidental and just random and just happened by luck or whatever you want to call it. But I say absolutely no to that. The fact that I registered for this at the last minute, we happen to be in Helen. Any other day of the year, honestly, we have been on the road for 5 years, almost 5 years. I rode on the road by myself or on gravel 100% of the time all across our country. This could have happened any other day. And if I had been out by myself, I would not be here today, I'm sure of. And there were 300 some odd people in that Gran Fondo ride that day. And, I don't find it coincidental that there were you guys who stopped and helped, thank goodness. And that other people helped as well. And just the whole thing to me is totally a miracle from God. And, I've been a believer in Jesus since I was a teenager, and, I lived my life that way. And I believe 100% that he saved me that day, and he used you guys to do that. And I know it's fine if you don't believe that. I get it. I understand. But I just want to say, for me and for my family, we believe that that's exactly what happened. That God used you guys to save me. He didn't put his hand directly on me and save me, but he worked through you guys to do that. And without that, I absolutely would not be here today. So, I'm so thankful that all you guys were there and that you decided to stop and help. Because like Andy and like you guys said, if CPR and chest compressions, that's probably what saved me for the most part. So thank you. That's all I can say.
Thanks, Cory. All right, John with an H, we're going to go to you. Coincidence or God?
I'm going to say respectfully, and I guess it'll go into sort of minutia of how God is working. Is it that on one hand, it would give credence to every time an NFL quarterback prayed that whatever wide receiver caught the pass in the end zone, that's God working. But if you want to say that it was God working through each and every person in caring about each other, okay, I'll buy that. But I'm not necessarily someone that believes God is moving pieces around. I think it's more of an example thing.
Oh, thanks for your response. All right, John without an H, I think you were up next in our intros.
Yeah, I think there was a confluence of events that came together. And I'm glad we were there. I am so glad we were there to save Cory, and that we had each other and smart and capable people. I think if there were miracles like this, God miracles, they'd be happening all over the place, or they should be happening all over the place. For every miracle that someone could point to that said God was, transitioning through the moment to save that person, I can point to a million where I'm like, where was he? Why wasn't he there that for those people? So I fall on the side of, I think, I heard a little bit of this in John. It's like, hey, I think there's a lot of good people out there. I think there's a lot of helpful people out there. I think there's a lot of really good science out there that all came together and helped save Cory's life. So totally respecting everybody's belief system. Mick, I totally respect everything that you've been through and that Cory's described and his way of life. I'm just, I think it was a fortuitous moment that we all came together in that moment.
Yeah, roger that, man. We fully respect that on the show for sure. So thanks for your honesty there. All right. Matt, I think you were up next on intros. Coincidence or God?
So, Cory's event and his incident, I think it's important that we all came together and we all filled a role that day. There was a lot of coincidences, and I think the biggest thing is that we worked as a team and we weren't prepared for what we did, but we did it, and we worked together, and everyone, did their best. We did our best to CPR, and EMS did their best to continually shocking Cory and giving him the epi, and like John and John said, there, if if I'm on the side that if this was a miracle and that God, if God was involved, then there should be more events like this. Which I think that us being there was we did everything we can do and ended up in a positive outcome. And, we're happy to have Cory with us.
Yeah, right on, man. Thanks for the honest answer. All right. Dan, how about you? Coincidence or God?
Yeah. It's been 4 years, thinking a lot about this, especially leading up to the show here today. And for me, there's just so many, the cumulative effect of all of the contributions people made that were big and small and seemingly inconsequential at the time or hugely consequential at the time. To me, I can't, in good faith, label that as a coincidence or just a culmination of coincidences. There's a bigger hand at play there. And so in my mind, and when I think a lot about this, there's no doubt this is a miracle and that God put the people that Cory needed together in the right place in the right time to do the right thing. And thank God, all of those people chose to take an action and do the thing that we were put there to do.
Yeah. Thanks for your honest answer, man. Appreciate it. All right, Evan, you're up. Coincidence or God?
Yeah. It's a tough question for me. Coincidence or God? I don't know. I still don't know 4 years later. But I'll share that I was moved heavily emotionally that day. And I do live my life to the fullest and respecting the time that we have here on this earth. And opening my mind up to new perspectives. Mick challenges me to explore, and I respect it. And it has opened me up to another sort of opportunity of where I've felt something spiritual in my life since. So I'm curious. I'll just say that I'm a curious individual, but I don't know. And I am thankful and appreciative of everybody sharing their story and being able to talk to Cory today. I think it's really, really, really cool. So thanks.
Yeah, thanks for your honest answer. All right, Eric, you're up. Tell us, coincidence or God?
I mean, I'd say it was God. Just too many things had to line up absolutely perfect down to the second, down to the minute. And being in the middle of Helen, Georgia, with no middle of nowhere, God's country, let's just say, that just there's no other explanation for me. I mean, I grew up Catholic school, and that's ingrained in my upbringing. So, yeah, I would say it's a miracle from God that Cory's here with probably even better performance than he had before the incident.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your honest answer. Hence, coincidence or God?
Like I said, all of the above. I would say I don't think the outcome would have been the same if you took out any little portion of this entire event. I don't think you can take one hair out of this event and the outcome be the same. I don't believe so. I think the number one contributing factor is just Cory's resilience and just him being outside of his, the arteries in his heart, just being in great condition and his body just not giving up. And like I said, his body was sending me messages that, hey, this is working when we were doing CPR. So I would say his resilience, his training, his just desire to live, the right people at the right time and right place. And for him to have been out for as long as he was, it's almost medically impossible to not have any brain damage from the lack of oxygen for that long. Like, it's impossible. Like, it's very rare. So yes, there's definitely some God in there, some higher power that just saw the greatness of all these people coming together for one cause, and sprinkling in some good deed, just some good fate out there. 100%. I think it's a sum of all parts.
Yeah. Thanks for the authentic answer there. Andy, you're up next. Coincidence or God?
There's too many factors, and I serve a big God, and I 100% believe it's a God thing. God put us all there. It's bigger than all of us. So.
Thanks for your honest answer, Shad.
Yeah. So to piggyback off you and Dan and Eric, so many moving parts, so many things to orchestrate in this entire thing. Even just Cory even showing up to the race, and then everyone else's, what happened for y'all to get there too. To me, it just doesn't make sense. And for me and Andy, and then I think for what Matt said that he does too, we see death and we see people hurting, people dying, people struggling every single day that we work. So we see a lot different aspect of the public than most people see. And several of y'all have said something about how this is tragic. And for a normal human being, I'm not saying that we're not normal, but for a normal lay person, this is something that somebody shouldn't ever have to see. Unfortunately, it's the profession that I don't believe we just chose. I believe it's a calling. Any biblical person would say that what they do is a calling. It's something that God kind of placed on the inside of them to do or to pursue. And for me and Andy and what we do, you have to be a certain kind of person, and not to be hard or just blunt, but you have to be able. We see little babies die. We have to deal with screaming parents, and we have to deal with certain certain things that most normal people would say, I have PTSD after this, or I have to go see a psychiatrist after this because of the tragedy and the things that to take place. So, and that's just to put a little bit of behind of what we see on a day-to-day basis. So, circling back to your question, whether this was God or whether this was coincidence,
Yeah.
there's too many factors. And the stars just didn't happen to align that day several years ago. And to know that when we were leaving the scene and Cory was in a flatline. He's in asystole. There's no heart function. I know on TV, people see the flatline and they automatically go and clear, let's shock him. That's totally false, and that just doesn't happen. But to have somebody come back from that cardiac rhythm, which is death, that doesn't happen. And I mean, I'm not here to push my belief on anybody because everybody has their own opinion. But it's hard for us to do what we do and not grasp hold of how God really does orchestrate things from our point of view, So that's just how we see it. So 100% miracle.
Thanks for your honest answer and the additional info there. Appreciate that. And since I participated in this, I have to respond as well. So the question to me is coincidence or God? For me, there is nothing close to coincidence for this. There is every bit of God in action for this. I'll leave it at that since I think you guys have all outlined so well all of the different moving pieces. But for me, it's 100% God in action type of moment. All right, guys. Well, let's do final question for Cory, and then we'll throw it out to the group. Cory, how has your life changed as a result of this?
That's another really good question, Mick. It's hard. I think I described it before when I said, I have a hard time sometimes figuring out that this really happened to me. So, I know obviously it did happen, and I said that before. Prior to this event, I felt as though my life was pretty good. I mean, I've been a Christian for most of my life. I've lived that way, not had a lot of drama or stress in my life. I've actually had a pretty easy life kind of up to that point. I mean, there were a couple of things that happened, like my youngest son being born in our car. That was one crazy incident. But anyway, that's another whole story. Yeah, my life was pretty easy up to that point. And then after that happened, and I've had 4 years now to reflect on it and pray about it and talk to God about it and try to figure out, what am I supposed to be doing? Why did you save my life? Do you have something bigger for me to do? And I firmly believe that when you pray to God, he says one of three things. He says yes, he says no, or he says wait. And I think maybe I'm still in that waiting mode, trying to figure out, what do you have planned for the rest of my life? Am I supposed to go do something really big for you, or, what am I supposed to do? So, I'm kind of in that mode right now. But, it gave me a much better appreciation of life because none of us are here forever. We're all going to die. It's a matter of how and when. So I do appreciate life every day. I appreciate waking up every day. And I mean, I think that's kind of how I would summarize how I've changed after it. Again, my life was good before. It's been good after. I certainly feel bad for Paula because she's the one that took the brunt of all of this. And I think she still has some PTSD when stuff goes on. Like I was in a crash like a year after or a week after I moved into this house, had a separated shoulder. But anyway, that stuff happens when you're on a bike. But anyway, I just think that, I'm kind of doing okay. I mean, I think I'm doing fine. And I do have more appreciation of life and what it really means to live and that God's given us only a number of days on this earth. And we just need to use it to the best that we can to honor and please him. So I think that's my short/long answer to that.
All right. Well, we appreciate the response. Okay, guys. So it's the final question and it's a free for all to all of you. And it's the same one. How has your life changed? Anybody that wants to respond is welcome to. Nobody necessarily needs to, but we are glad to hear your perspective.
I'm going to go ahead and jump in. And this is what it's shown me is that if it looks like you can help, you should help because there's a chance you may be the only person that's there at a very important time. It's not really a choice. You may think you have a choice, but it's not really a choice.
Right. Anybody else have any thoughts how your life has changed as a result of this?
Mick, can I just add one more thing to my
go ahead, Andy.
Answer to that question?
Man.
Yeah. This is just a story that just happened like literally 2 Saturdays ago, and I talked to Mick about this already. He knows about it, but I was doing a Saturday morning group ride, and, it was a normal Saturday morning group ride, and, we were fine. And then got kind of toward the end of it. There was a group of us who were in the front. Another guy had gotten dropped from the group, and so he was taking a shortcut coming back into town. And we were going up the same road, and we noticed something in the middle of the road. There were a bunch of cars stopped, and we were like, what's going on up there? Well, we get up there, and this guy who was 69 years old had been hit from behind by a big truck. And he was laying on the side of the road, and he was unconscious, and he was he was convulsing, I think, like I was probably doing the same thing. And he was totally out of it. It looked like it didn't look good at all. And so I just stopped and prayed right there for him. And, there was not much we could do except somebody called 911. They showed up, and they ended up having to life flight him out of there, which when the helicopter showed up, I was like, this is not good at all. And so when he was laying there on the ground, I found his cell phone, and I actually picked it up, and I called his wife and told her that I said, is your husband a cyclist? And she said, yes. I said, he's just been struck by a truck, and they're taking him off in the ambulance. And she was hysterical, probably just like Paula was when she got the call about me. And again, that was another thing where I was on the other side of the story, just like with my dad at my house. And I was just like, I can't believe this is happening to me, like, again. And so they took him off, and unfortunately he did not make it. He passed away like this past week. So I just wanted to throw that out as just another part of my story that, it was not coincidence that I was there that day, and it's terrible that he passed away. But, I just want to add that piece in there, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's tough too. Sad for that family. Well, guys, sort of last call here on how your life has changed or been impacted by the Cory Eubanks incident.
Mick, I'll just say quickly, I think it's just really reinforced for me. Like, you can't ever underestimate the power of people taking action and coming together to influence an outcome. I know I mentioned in my response to your first question, like I do feel very strongly that all of us were put there for a reason to take an action, but the action is still a choice that people have to take. You get put in situations all the time where you can choose to take an action or not. And I just think it's reinforced with me that when you see something or you experience something or you're put in a situation and you're given a choice to make, that you make a choice that you feel like can help somebody or influence an outcome in a positive way.
Yeah, I agree. And just realize how fragile really everything is, right? Be happy and appreciative of where you are today and what you could influence and moving forward. Right. I've become a better person, I think, in that respect. Just realizing the fragility of everything, of life, of everything, especially as I get older, right? Approaching 50. My kids are getting older, and it's just be a good person, do right. It doesn't always have to be the religious aspects. You could just always be a good person and like Dan just said, help someone. I think we're all put here for a reason, but we don't know what that reason is yet. We'll find out one day.
It's almost life prior to this event and after this event, and a little bit of that coincides with COVID. And I believe that's very same day when we were driving back, wife had made an offer on a lake house, which we ended up getting. So it's a lot of things that happen in that are tied together, which has really definitely changed my perspective and just slow down, just look around, and you never know who. Don't just assume things. You never know who can be helpful, who can improve your life in your immediate surroundings. Just looking at life a little bit more holistically and being more of a believer. You can train and you can prepare for all you want. There's always going to be that last piece, that extra secret sauce, that extra higher power that has to come into play for things to align. I really believe that.
Yeah, right on.
Yeah. It just gives you hope. And everything we were going through with COVID, it just gave me more hope in humanity. I mean, just everyone's willingness to jump in. We spent 45 minutes of our, Saturday helping someone out. Look at what came out of this. I mean, it's just immense benefit. So I love telling the story of just how much of an impact this has had, and just how it's changed my perspective in life. And people, like, there's always something out there that you can learn, and you can find something new. People you never thought you'd have something in common with end up having a lot more in common than you realized.
And it was interesting because you just made a point a moment ago about, we spent roughly 45 minutes, and yet that changed a lifetime.
Yeah. It's funny, like, I'm 55 this year, and we've seen, like, in our demographic, seen a lot of people that have had heart issues. I guess we're just at that age. Like, one of my best friends right over here in Dunedin had a heart attack a couple years ago. And one of the takeaways, I think, I learned from him and the instance with Cory, it's like, be smart, be proactive about monitoring your own health. Heart scans are like super easy to get now. Modern medicine is just getting better and better. There's, you should be able to know what's going on with your body. And just like Cory described, his familial genetics, like my buddy, his own father had a heart attack and series. So genetics are real, and if you're predisposed, you should be on top of it. Whether you're 40 or 50 or whatever. So that's one big takeaway for me in all of this, health wise.
Yeah. And I'll just add too that every single person I tell my story to, if it's a guy, I'm like, number one, do you have family history? Number two, have you ever gotten your heart checked for any potential issues? And I try to encourage them, look, go do something. Don't just sit back and think that you may seemingly be healthy, but maybe you're not, because none of us really know exactly. So I always encourage people, just go get a heart scan or whatever you want to call it. You get your heart checked by somebody. And, because it's just like John said, I mean, that's an important thing to do for sure. And I never went to the doctor prior to this incident. Like, I'd not been to the doctor in probably 15 years. Not that the doctor would have picked up on something like this, but nonetheless, I think it's good to be proactive with this kind of thing.
I mean, I'm grateful we have new friends in Paula and with Cory, and just to be a small part of their life, and how they have told the story it's been an honor, to be honest with you.
Yeah, super, super cool. I think right after Cory got out of the hospital, it was, I don't know, 2 weeks after the incident, he came up to the station. And we got to take a picture with him. We got to see him. Andy's got pictures on his phone of the whole thing. And then a year after that, when the first time he placed first back in his age group, I've got another picture with him, almost a year to the date of his incident. So all these things have been super cool. And like Andy said, like, we've gained friends out of them now. Cory and Paula are super, super sweet people. And we'd do anything for them. So this has just been, it's an experience that I wouldn't wish on anybody, but again, the good out of it has been pretty cool to see. So,
yeah, that's wonderful. Really, really cool stuff.
Yeah, and you guys are always forever going to be part of my story. So I'm doing it again. I'm sorry.
Hey, I get it. It's okay.
But just thank you guys for everything you did for me.
hey, Cory, another thing that I do want to say to you is, a second ago when you were saying you're kind of wondering what your purpose is now, and why you felt like the Lord was gracious enough to give you another day. One thing that is cool just for your knowledge is, I teach EMT classes too. I've taught a couple the past couple years, and when we get to the section of cardiac stuff and CPR, you are always the story that I tell. So
Wow.
you are the real life story that I'm able to use to teach them how to do it, what to do, and especially when we do CPR classes, I can't even count how many times I've already used your story. So if it helps one other person knowing bystander CPR, or while we're teaching EMT classes to be a better provider, I mean, to me, that's worth it, in my opinion.
That's awesome. Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, that's encouraging for me to hear that. And yeah, I mean, if that's how God wants to use my story, then that's great. I think that's awesome. Thank you.
Well, guys, I want to end on a what I think is a quite light note, particularly because, all is well that ends well. So, Lassiter, tell us about the conversation that you and John had about rescue breathing.
So while John was doing CPR and I was at the holding Cory's head, John looks at me. I don't know if I think he may have paused for a second, and he says, "Should we do mouth to mouth?" And I just look at him and I'm like, just keep going. Just keep doing compressions. And, maybe now I'd do mouth to mouth, but
I was relieved because I didn't know if Cory had COVID. I was like, oh man.
Yeah, I didn't want to, catch COVID or whatever else. I didn't know Cory, so, but maybe, now, I think I'd be convinced to do mouth to mouth.
Well, I want to thank you guys for coming together, for creating this memento for the family, for capturing so many perspectives here. Thank you so much for your opinions on things, for your recollections of things. It's been a real pleasure having you guys on. So thank you a bunch.
Definitely.
Yeah. Thanks for putting it together, Mick.
Glad to do it. Well, there you have it. Was it coincidence or God? You decide for yourself, but I believe you just heard a story for His glory. When You Look is powered by the stories that guests share. So if you have a story to tell, let us know by going to whenyoulook.com and click on Be a Guest, or click on the link in the description below. Please subscribe to the channel, like this video, tell us what you think in the comments, and share it with somebody that will be impacted by the story. Thanks and God bless.